Welcome everyone to another segment of our Mental Health Moments. My name is Linda Golick. I'm the Health and Wellbeing Consultant here at Bellin Health. So thanks for taking the time to join us today. So I am so pleased to have us joined today by our very special therapist today. This is Dr. Tiffany Bourne. So Dr. Bourne is a licensed child psychologist with us at Bellin Health. So Dr. Bourne, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Bourne, if you don't mind, if you can maybe just get us started by telling our audience a little bit about yourself and about your background and some of the things that you do here at Bellin.
Sure. So I'm a licensed psychologist and also a board certified behavior analyst, or BCBA, if you've heard that term before. I've been at Bellin for about 6 years, I believe, maybe six and a half. And I'm from Wisconsin originally, but I was a little bit, and then moved back home and to work at Bellin. And I've been working with kids and adolescents and their families since that time. I do some testing, so diagnosing, as well as therapy.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. So today we thought it would just be really timely. We all know that kids are back to school, and sometimes that's a really exciting thing for our kids, and sometimes it's a not so exciting thing. So we're going to kind of dive into some of that today. So, Dr. Bourne, I think just kind of a general starting point, it seems to me that we're seeing a lot of like increased cases of anxiety and depression and ADHD and a lot of different things going on with our kids. Is that my imagination, or is that valid that that seems to be increasing in our recent times?
Yeah, it's absolutely valid. And unfortunately, it was something that we were seeing increasing at a alarming rate even before the pandemic. We were seeing
Mm.
rates of anxiety and depression in our kiddos really increasing. You're probably aware there's increased rates of autism spectrum in our community, and across the nation. ADHD is very prevalent as well. And when the pandemic hit, unfortunately, those things only got worse. The rates of anxiety and depression, social isolation really increased, as did our mental health concerns for our adults who are caring for our kiddos, right? So, yes, we're talking about kids and their mental health, but the mental health of their parents and caregivers and teachers is really important in this too.
Let's dive into just kind of the general topic of anxiety. It seems to me that we hear that a lot. That kids are experiencing a lot of anxiety for a lot of different reasons. So, what are your thoughts on what's normal, like what's okay for your kids to be having some anxiety about things? And then when do we need to go a step further where they actually maybe need some additional assistance, whether it be something medical or some counseling? Like, how do we navigate that?
Yes, that's a great question because anxiety is normal, right? We all have anxiety, and that is a normal part of being a human. I think sometimes even adults, and myself included, try to get rid of it altogether, right? Anxiety must be bad. But being anxious makes us know that we care about things, right? It has us know what we
Mhm.
want to focus on and where we need to put more attention in our life. And if we're not anxious, we're not going to be putting forth that effort. So I think normalizing that for our kids too is that it's okay that you're worried about going back to school, or it's okay that you're worried about this big test coming up. That's normal. It becomes a problem when that worry gets in the way of doing the things that they want to do. So if we're so worried about the test that we can't actually study for it, or we get the test in front of us and now I can't start, that's a problem. If we're not getting sleep because of that worry, that's a problem. If we don't want to leave the house or don't want to do things that we used to really love and enjoy time with our friends, now that anxiety is getting in the way and is becoming a problem, and we might need to seek out some additional help.
Very helpful, very helpful. I think we see that in adults as well, that once it starts to interfere with your regular life, that's
Yes.
something to pay attention to, and it needs to you need to take some action steps on that.
Yes, and with the goal of being able to deal with it and work through it, not getting rid of it altogether, because that's a goal you won't be successful with, and I think our lives wouldn't be as rich if we got rid of anxiety altogether.
Well, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up. So I think that that brings me to another question of how do we how do we balance that for our kids, right? Because we want everything so beautiful and so smooth and easy for our kids. We want to protect them from things, but
Mhm.
yet there's that balance of trying to also help them understand that life can be challenging. So what are your thoughts on that topic in particular?
Yes, I caution parents all the time to try not to fix all of our kids' problems
Mm.
because although that might help in the moment, you take that kid's anxiety or anger or fear away in for that particular situation because you handled it. They now don't know how to handle that when it comes up, and it will come up in their day-to-day life, and they don't have the strategies and the coping mechanisms to do so, and then they also feel like something's wrong. If I'm worried about something, it must not be okay, or if I get angry about something, that can't be okay, so there must be something wrong with me. So modeling that all emotions are good emotions, it's just what we do with them and how we handle them and do the things we want in life that matter.
I thought it was really interesting. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Barbie movie, um, so
Love the Barbie
close your
movie. So good.
yes, because one of the great things that I really appreciated about the Barbie movie, so plug your ears if you don't want to hear this. Barbie has a choice on whether she wants to go back to Barbie land where everything is perfect and she has no worries and it's sunshine every day, or to go into the human world where she has the gamut of emotions. So, not just happiness and joy, but fear and tears and sadness. And Barbie chose that. At the end of the movie. And I thought
Yes.
that was really just a great lesson for all of us to remember that human emotions are going to come and go. It is going to be up and down, and of course, that's normal for our kids as well.
Yes, one activity I often do with families is I have the kiddos and the parents write down as many good emotions as they can and as many bad emotions as they can. And I can definitely see this change because some of my kids get it and they're like, haha, I know you're tricking me. They're all good emotions. And the parents often struggle with that. And they have this really clear, well, anger, sadness, jealousy, all these are bad. And we really use it as a talking point of, nope, we need to have the full range of human emotions. We just wanna be able to navigate through them and not get stuck in any of them.
That's a cool activity. I like that. I like that. Let's talk about a little bit about social media in our young people. I think it's a concern of parents. Kids want to be on social media. They want to use social media. They want to be connected to their friends. How do we navigate that? What's healthy for them? What's unhealthy for them? What are some things to look out for if our kids are on a lot of social media?
Yeah, it's a concern I definitely share. I've said to my friends many times, I'm so glad I'm not growing up in this age where
Mhm,
everything that I do is could be broadcast and on the internet forever.
mhm,
Social media is not bad in and of itself, right? There are really good things that come from it. That connection that you mentioned, getting to know what's happening. We're able to, like during a global pandemic, stay connected with and talk with people that we aren't able to see on a daily basis. Some of my kiddos who are on the autism spectrum are able to use social media to find people who kind of fit their niche and who understand them a little bit better than maybe the people that are in their immediate community. So that there can be a lot of helpful things, but there are a lot of drawbacks as well. We're often comparing our regular, ordinary life with all of those emotions to everyone's highlight reels. We're seeing that people are using filters and ways to make themselves look the best that they can, which can create more of that anxiety and low self esteem and depression, especially in kids who are already at risk for those feelings. It can be difficult to be overly vulnerable, right? Some of our kids aren't aware of what they should and shouldn't be putting out on social media, and that can be used from their peers in bullying situations, but also from those who are really looking to harm our kids and use it for scams, trying to get money, that sort of thing. And we really know the brain is not fully developed and ready to make those decisions when you're
mm.
quite young. So it's something that parents have to be aware of and really working with their kids on.
Two things that you said that I want to expand upon. So first, I want to hear more about the brain development because I
Mhm,
think that's interesting for us to learn about that, how that's different, in a
mhm.
in a younger child and in a teen. And then I want to talk a little bit about bullying.
Yeah. Yeah. So our frontal lobe, which is the part of the brain that's right in the front, just called the frontal lobe, is the part of the brain that's responsible for thinking, reasoning, making good decisions, and being able to think forward to the future of what consequences might happen if I do X, Y, and Z at this moment. It helps us to be rational creatures and not just emotional creatures. And we know the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until about age 26 or 27 in a
Mm.
typically developing person. So if you put, ADHD on top of that or autism on top of that or mental health conditions, it might even take longer to kind of get to that stage. And so, really, until about age 13, I would be concerned about social media use at all for kiddos. For those older than 13, with supervision and with a family plan, to be able to kind of figure out what works can make sense. And it's so individualized for each particular child and family. There's a family media usage plan that's you can get online, and you can really use that to structure a family conversation about what does social media usage look like and what should the rights and responsibilities of everyone in the family, not just the kiddos, be around that.
Do you know, Dr. Bourne, is there a difference in brain development between boys and girls?
Yes,
Yes.
it's hotly debated,
Okay.
but we definitely have seen differences in gender. But it's like a lot of things that there's more variability within those categories than between those categories. So really hard to make those sweeping generalizations. I would say it's more important, regardless of the gender of your children, to think about my child. And you know your child best as a
Mhm.
parent. What can my child handle? And
Mhm.
what kind of things do I need to put in place? And with social media, it's hard because I can tell you the kiddos I work with know more about social media and electronics than I do. So being
Yeah.
able to stay on top of it and know what they're doing and what's out there can be really really challenging. And a lot of our social media outlets have ways for parents to kind of have a supervisory role and kind of be able to see what's happening. You can create like kid accounts on certain like Facebook Messenger Kids, so that there's more parental controls there. So there are safeguards that can be put into place. Parents just have to be aware that sometimes our kids and teenagers can kind of outsmart us and
Mm.
figure out ways to go around those age limits and around those kind of parental controls at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple questions coming in on the chat. So if you don't mind, we'll kind of pick up some of these. So, what are your thoughts on allowing a teen experiencing school avoidance to homeschool slash attend virtual while working out a new medication and therapist? Then, once the anxiety OCD is manageable, switching back to in person.
Yeah, and I want to give a caveat for any of these that I don't know these particular children and teenagers and families. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt and work with your own kind of team to figure out what's best for your particular case. But sometimes, certainly, I've had patients that have had to take a break from in person school and do more of a virtual or online learning in order to work on other things in their lives and be able to kind of get back into it. I do caution that sometimes when we're anxious about something, if we avoid it altogether, it's much harder to get back into it later on. So I would use that pretty much as a kind of not, I don't want to say last resort, but as something of this child's really, really struggling to the point that they're not able to function. Before I would say that, because getting back into that school setting after we've taken that break can be really challenging.
Okay, thank you for that. And another question here. In regards to when anxiety interferes with daily activities, is there a time frame, such as 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, generally accepted on average, where a family should reach out to medical professionals slash counselors for help?
Yeah, I think we want to look for a pattern. So it's normal for anxiety around like big transitions to kind of get in the way for a little bit of time. But if it's something that's been going on for a couple weeks or a month and really is impacting the child, then I think it's time to reach out. And you can always reach out and then change your mind if it's not necessary. Unfortunately, there is a um, lack of access to mental health professionals because of that kind of mental health tsunami we talked about. So it
Yeah.
does take a little while to get in places. So, if I'm the parent and I have a concern, I'm probably going to make that call pretty quickly, knowing that it's going to take a while for that child to get seen. And then if things get better, great, I can cancel it and someone else is going to fill that spot. But if things get worse, now I'm at a crisis level and now it's I have to wait still. So I would kind of reach out earlier, just knowing the kind of the landscape of mental health care.
And I think sooner rather than later. I mean, Charles, when he was on the program, we always talked about that we all should have been born with a therapist. Like
Yes.
wouldn't it be
Yes.
wonderful if every single one of us just automatically had one? Because everybody's got something that they could talk
Yes.
about. So if you're concerned, why not have that conversation? Why not get those things going?
Yes, and then modeling for your child and your family that you don't go to therapy because there's something wrong with you and you need to fix it. You go to therapy to figure out how to be the best version of yourself. And anything that's standing as a barrier to help get rid of that barrier or to be able to move over it or under it. It's not something that there shouldn't be that stigma, right? Of that
Right.
only people who are really struggling see therapists. And I think that our society is moving in that direction of more openness and readiness and willingness to talk about that, people who are functioning really well have therapists and
Mhm.
get that help. And that's one of the reasons why they are functioning as well as they are.
Mhm. I think that's one of the things that COVID did for us. It really, I think, more normalized these conversations, and we really are being more open about it. And it's just the idea of having someone help you navigate life's challenges as well, because we're all going to have challenges at some point. So you don't have to feel like there's something wrong with you just because you would like some assistance in navigating life's challenges. That's
Right.
very normal. Very
Right.
normal.
I think we've moved more towards prevention as well and like social emotional understanding from an early age. I'm so glad when I hear about when I have kiddos come in and they say, "Oh, yes, I learned about a growth mindset at school," or "Yes, I learned these breathing techniques," or "We did meditation at school," because these are things that help us all, whether we are at the height of our mental health capacity or not. And so being able to destigmatize and have these as kind of early learning things can be really helpful because when we develop habits over decades, it's a lot harder to change when I'm 50 and I'm dealing with my anxiety than when I'm
Mhm.
8 and I'm learning these strategies and I have those in my back pocket to kind of go through life. So I think that's also a positive that's coming in society.
You touched on that health and well-being piece, and of course, that's a piece that I'm very, very much interested in because I very much educate people on the idea of wellness is way more than your physical dimension. There's all these other things that come into us as human beings and how what makes us up as a whole. And so, I would love to hear from you. Really, what are some of those health and well-being practices that people can do and that kids can do that really do aid in a healthier status overall?
Yes, I talk to families all the time about how mental health and physical health aren't separate, right? We talk about them separately, but they're so connected, and they feed off of each other. I think sometimes we talk about the mental health things that come when you have physical things that are challenging, and that is certainly part of it. But it's also if we do physical activity and we work on our physical well-being, our mental health tends to follow and be in a more positive direction as well. So exercise, getting out in nature, getting some fresh air has been shown
Mhm.
over and over across the board to be really helpful for mental health and improving symptoms of diagnoses that are already there. So improving anxiety and depression symptoms in people who have those diagnoses, preventing those conditions from happening in the first place, and then also helping have a longer break between episodes and preventing relapse in mental health conditions of various natures. So we know that working on our body and getting those physical movements is so helpful across the board. And kids can do it in lots of ways. It doesn't have to be, we're not telling 5-year-olds to go run on the treadmill, right? It could be
Right.
using
Right.
Pokemon Go on the phone to go find those
Mhm.
Pokemon out there, or running around the neighborhood, or playing catch with mom or dad, which also allows those connections socially as well. So, getting that exercise, getting out in fresh air, so important. Eating healthy, getting good sleep,
Mhm.
all of the things
Yes.
that we talk about, and we're like, oh yeah, you're saying the same thing. Well, it's because they work and that they're important, and we often see that those are the same areas that are impacted when mental health starts to decline.
Well, I was thinking about too, just even for myself. I mean, what kind of mood am I in if I'm eating a lot of junk, if I'm not getting a lot of sleep, if
Hmm.
I'm not getting some movement in? I get to be a crabby adult. So, I mean, I think the same is really true for our kids in that, we have to look at some of these fundamentals too and see what kind of a base are we creating with our
Yes.
kids. And, some things we can work on by trying to get some more sleep or trying to get some more activity that can only help. some of these situations too.
Absolutely. You make an important point of modeling too, right? Of, yeah, we can tell our kids all day long to get some exercise and get good sleep. But if we aren't doing those things, if we're
Oh, very
sitting on our
true.
phones, it's
Yes.
going to be a lot harder for them to believe us and want to
Yes.
listen. So make it a
Good
family
point.
thing. Go do
Good
something
point.
together.
Absolutely. Okay, I got a couple more questions. I'm loving this, audience. Please sending them in because Dr. Bourne she's ready to answer these. So, any advice on how to tell if my teen is pulling a fast one on me about their fears of in-person school? One parent supports homeschool virtual. One parent thinks teen may be acting a bit. Any way to tell?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially not knowing the particular family. What I'm wondering if that's kind of getting at is sometimes parents have different belief systems around kind of mental health, and sometimes feel like mental health is used as kind of an excuse to get out of doing things. And certainly, teenagers especially are really good at making those excuses and getting out of things. So that can be part of it. But most of the time, people are not making up, mental health concerns. It's not something that's fun, right? It's not fun to be depressed. It's not fun to be
Yeah.
anxious. So usually, believing and going in with, okay, this is true for you is going to help regardless of the actual facts in the case. I'd much rather make the assumption that the person is telling us the truth and going with that than the assumption that they're kind of pulling that fast one or lying. Doesn't mean you're going to change your answers or what you're going to do, but if you come at it from a collaborative standpoint of we're going to work together as a team. So you're telling me you're feeling this way, I believe you. And let's problem solve together of how we can help, right? Versus if anyone would tell me that they don't believe what I'm telling them, I'm going to shut down and I'm going to say, I don't have any interest in problem solving with you. And I, that, what's the point? So I think coming at that, I believe you and I want to collaborate and be your teammate usually works a lot better than the adversary way.
Yeah. Very good. All right, we have another question. This one says, we currently provide all students social emotional learning. We are always looking for what else can we do to support our students and families. Are you aware of other programs or supports that schools could use to support students?
I love it. I love that the social emotional learning piece is there. There are a
Mhm.
lot of programs out there. And I'm not exactly sure what our local school districts use, although, like I said, I've been hearing good things from my kiddos about what they're bringing in from school. But there are a number of programs out there, and I can do some research and share that with that particular person after, if that would be
Okay,
okay. But I
great.
think big things are just having to be part of every day, right? It's not just something that's a like a counseling class, right? It's that curriculum throughout the day, and we are all working on these things. Those positive behavior interventions and supports that we see in schools, where we're working on having a community with clear kind of rules about how we treat one another, is really helpful to kind of build that sense of community and have people feel included. And then
Mhm.
having plans of what do we do when we do hear that bullying might be happening, or what do we do when there is a kiddo who's struggling, so that we can intervene before it becomes a really big crisis.
Let's go back to that bullying piece.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what do we do if our child is the bully, if our child is experiencing the bullying, or if you're seeing one of your friends bullied. Your
Yeah.
child is seeing one of their friends bullied. So what's the best way to address that?
Yes. Well, I love that you asked about all three of those components, because usually I just hear, what happens if your child's being bullied? And I understand that. But those other two are really important too. So let's start with if your child tells you that they're being bullied or you have concerns that they're being bullied. Some kind of warning signs might be if they start avoiding wanting to go to school and it hasn't been an issue in the past. They come home and they just are kind of a mess. They have big tantrums or meltdowns when they come home. They stop wanting to talk to friends that they've been talking to in the past. Sleep is impacted. Eating routines are impacted. Not wanting to do activities that they've been doing before. Whenever we're talking about a big conversation like bullying, the biggest piece is actually before the conversation happens. It's developing this relationship as a family that your child feels like they can come talk to you about anything, and that you're not going to either overreact or underreact. So sometimes families will kind of try to help their child by telling them how what they're concerned about is not really a big deal, but that sends the message of well, what you think is silly, or I don't believe you, or this isn't a big problem and it's not kind of worth our time. If someone gives me that attitude, I'm not likely to want to kind of come to them in the future either. But what I actually see more often than that is parents who kind of overreact. Child tells them that they're being bullied or something is happening, and they, as the protector, understandably want to fix it. Oh my gosh, tell me what happened. Where was this? Look, give me his mom's name. I'm going to call the principal tomorrow, and kind of makes it so that the child either feels like, whoa, well, now I have to manage my parents' emotions and I need to like get them to calm down. So I can't really share what's true for me. Or it ramps them up as well as like, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem. And I need a lot of help because even my mom is struggling to deal with this. So trying as much as we can just to stay neutral and calm and empathetic. And wow, that must be really hard. Tell me more. Where were you when this was happening? What was going on? Oh man. Was there anybody else around? What happened before? Kind of asking those questions in a way to get more information without making it seem like we're either saying that their problems are silly or that we're kind of overreacting there.
I really appreciate that idea of don't overreact, don't underreact, really kind of feel that out and remain that neutral person. I love that. I think that's a great approach for a lot of things,
Yes.
with
Yes.
kids, right?
And it's hard because we want to be the protector. We want to keep anything bad from happening to our sweet kids.
Mhm.
But being able to show that we can regulate our emotions in that moment goes a long way to giving them the confidence that they can as well. So we want to instill in our kids that we believe that they can solve these problems. We're there to help them.
Mhm.
And there's a
Mhm.
team there to help them. There's teachers, there's counselors, there's psychologists, there's administration at school that's there to help them. They have friends, but we believe in them, and we're there as a team to help support, but not to take over and fix the problem, or not to just say, suck it up and this is just something everybody deals with. Move on.
Yeah. What are some of the common things that you see really in your patients and then the families that you work with? I mean, what are some of the other big concerns that tend to kind of cause issues for kids and their families?
Yeah. Can we first go back to talk about what if your kid's the bully
Yes,
or the
yes,
bystander? Because
yes,
I think that's really
absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
I think sometimes families, when they hear or that their child is the bully, feel a lot of guilt and shame themselves, and they might react either by denying it. There's no way that my kid is doing this, or they might act by shaming the child or trying to make the child feel guilty. And understandably, you don't want your child to be hurting someone else. But we know that shame and guilt are not very helpful emotions. And if we are kind of bullying our kids, to tell them to not bully others doesn't work very well. So we're kind of perpetuating this negative kind of interaction style. So if you find out that your child is doing something you don't like, whether it be bullying or anything, trying to again be that child's teammate, even when they're doing something you don't like. Okay, help me understand what's going on. Where were you when the situation was happening? What has happened in your life, and what kind of needs are here? Oftentimes, bullying happens when a child doesn't have the social emotional skills to interact appropriately. Sometimes bullies are being bullied by others. We have to be able to figure that out, and maybe they feel the need to do this behavior so that they can feel protected themselves. Sometimes bullying happens because there's some anxiety or depression or mental health things going on for that child, and they don't know how to deal with those things. So being able to kind of work together to figure out, what's going on. Yes, this behavior is not acceptable, and we're going to work with you on how to kind of work as a team to help it be better rather than just punishing, taking things away and shaming, because that's unlikely to actually make the problem better. When for anybody at risk, bullies included, we want them to feel part of a community and supported and around positive models. And we're not going to be doing that if we're just shaming or just disciplining. So that would be kind of my thoughts for if your child is the bully. You also mentioned like the bystander piece, right? What if
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
child's just
because I
kind of
think
like
some kids
seeing it?
really, get involved in that and they're not really sure how to react and how to protect their friend or who they should speak up to or what they should do.
Yes, and it's so impactful. We often don't think about it as being as big of a deal, but for our kids, especially middle school, high school, and beyond, our friend relationships are the most important relationships in their lives. So if they're seeing a friend or even a peer that's getting bullied, that can be just as impactful to them as being the victim themselves. Especially with that like feeling of helplessness, like I don't know what to do. So being willing to empathize and validate those feelings for the bystanders as well, and not just say, well, this isn't your problem, don't worry about it, is helpful. It's so dependent on the situation of whether a kid should get involved and what that should look like. If your child has the kind of social capital and the ability to kind of stand up for a friend and in a safe way, so it's not a situation where they're worried about their own physical safety, great. We love to encourage kind of standing up for your friends and being there.
Mhm.
Um, if your child doesn't, or they're worried about kind of blowback on them, talking about who you can talk to in the school to kind of provide that support. Could you go talk to the person that's being bullied after the bully is away and say, hey, I'm here for you, right? Anything to kind of lend that support that's going to not get that child also too involved in the mix and then possibly be a victim as well. So I think that's a really important kind of piece of the puzzle we don't talk about a lot, is those people who are just kind of seeing it happening.
Well, I think it's a really great opportunity to teach your kids empathy too. For if they're seeing something happening to somebody else, for them, it may be true. Yeah, I love that. The idea of reaching out to that person, saying, "Hey, I'm here for you, and I want to help you. I want to be there for you." That's a great opportunity to teach a young person for sure.
Absolutely. Sorry, my
Yeah.
screen went black. It's just taking me a
Oh,
second
that's
to
okay.
get
Oh,
back.
it fell asleep.
Yes.
It fell asleep. Well, keep
There
chatting in
we
your questions if you have more for Dr. Bourne. Um, okay, so other things that we haven't talked about yet that you kind of see other examples of what families and kids are kind of dealing with. Anything else in particular that you wanted to address, especially going back to school and the season that we're in right now?
Yeah, I think mental health in our kiddos, especially, often comes out looking like anger or irritability, or
Mm-hmm.
defiance. So recognizing that those behaviors and attitudes can be associated with a whole skew of mental health concerns as well, and that typically a child or an adult as well are not going to choose anger as a response just because it makes them feel good. It doesn't feel good to be angry a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times. It doesn't feel good to be um, kind of making things difficult for others. So if we can, as parents and as caregivers and as teachers, think about, okay, this child's not doing this against me on purpose, right? It's unlikely that they woke up this morning and said, how can I make my mom's life hell today? Right? There's a reason behind these behaviors and these angry emotions and these outbursts. What can we figure out about what that reason is, and how can we help alleviate those concerns, give other strategies and suggestions going forward, and really work together rather than just feeling kind of victimized ourselves? Because I think that's natural too, right? It's difficult to be a parent ever, and it's really challenging to be a parent when you have a child who has significant emotional behavioral needs. So being able to take care of our own mental health, but then also being on our child's team can be really important.
Absolutely. And I think we've talked on this program before about adverse child experiences, and we've dug into that a little bit, and the idea of not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. So when
Yes.
a child is displaying some of these emotional things, not to right away think, oh, there's something wrong with this kiddo. Just the opposite, really, really thinking about, well, what happened? What happened that this child is angry? What happened that this
Hmm.
child is reacting this way?
Hmm.
Helps put a different lens and kind of a different level of compassion on maybe what
Yes.
that child has experienced.
Yes. And then gets us to a problem solving place. If our thought
Mhm.
is this child is bad, or this child has X, Y, or Z diagnosis, and then that's the way this is going to be, we're kind of stuck, right? But if our thought is this is the what this child is working with, this is their past, or this is where their brain is at this moment. Okay, we get that. So here's how we can help, and let's work on that together versus just classifying them as in a negative way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right. Any other areas that you wanted to address today, Dr. Bourne? Anything else that you wanted to share with us?
One area that parents ask me about a lot is homework,
Hmm.
especially with the
Oh,
start of
yes.
school.
Yes.
Kids can really struggle with that. Families can really struggle with that. So that's a topic that
Hmm.
comes up a lot if we want to talk about that for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Yes. Would love to hear about that.
So a lot of times kids will have problems around homework, and it's really important to figure out, is this a can't do kind of problem, or is this a won't do kind of problem? So is the child really struggling because academically they're not really understanding what's being asked? Are they struggling because they have given their all day at school and their executive functioning for that day is just drained and there isn't any left to give? Are they struggling because they don't want to be doing this? They want to be on video games and they want to be outside, right? What are the reasons behind it so that we can figure out a plan kind of as a family to work through it? Homework is such a challenge for so many of the families I work with. I've had second and third graders whose families tell me that they spend hours at night trying to get through homework. That's
Mm,
not okay. That's not
mhm.
good. It's not helpful for that child or for that family's life. And they're probably not learning very much if that's the case. We really want to be seeing homework should be about 10 minutes a night per grade level. So first graders should really only have about 10 minutes of homework a night.
Okay.
Sixth grader about an hour. If it's
Okay.
drastically more than that, we got to figure out what's going on. And it might be talking with the teacher of,
Mhm.
what expectations are here, what can we prioritize, what can we do to help, because this is such a struggle every night, because we want your child to be able to have school time and then home time that's positive as well. And it's not fun for families to be fighting with kids to be doing homework either. So figuring out kind of strategies that kind of help will be help the child be successful and help the parents be happier, healthier beings too.
I like the rule of thumb of the 10 minutes per grade level. That's a helpful, I think that's a helpful recommendation for people to kind of know kind of a ballpark idea of what would be appropriate for kids of certain ages.
Yes, yeah, and, sometimes I've had families that they've been really working hard and hours and hours, and then they talk to the teacher, and the teacher's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't want that to
Mm,
be happening."
mhm.
So, usually, working with the school and having that collaboration is the most helpful thing when there is homework issues. There's lots of strategies that can help too, like having a specific time and place to do homework, preferably distraction free, or some kids actually need like a fidget or like light music on in the background, something to kind of help figuring out what works best for your child and that time that works best. I like to think about kind of grandma's rule. You eat your dinner, you get cookies. That do your homework and then you get to the fun things. But sometimes we need a little bit of a break to kind of refill our executive functioning bucket when we get home from school before we can kind of go into that homework piece. So kind of doing some trial and error, but then having kind of a set time of, all right, this is our homework time. It's dedicated for this. This is our homework space. If possible, we only use this for homework space. And maybe everybody in the family is doing homework during that time. Maybe that's the time when parents are doing their chores as well. So it's kind of a set time and place for this is when we're doing this and getting this done.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Again, just setting that example because kids are watching us all the time, and
Yes,
they will duplicate what we do. So we can
absolutely.
also have quite a bit of influence just by being that good example. So that's
Yes.
good for us to remember too.
Yes. And they learn way more
Awesome.
from what we do than what we say. So
They too. I always use my godkids as an example. They lived a couple hours away, and when I would visit them, I would take healthy snacks with me. And amazingly enough, these kids would eat healthy snacks when Auntie Linda would come to visit. But their mom couldn't get them to do it when I wasn't around. It was merely the example of seeing someone eat an orange or have a yogurt that
yes.
influenced them, and that's just a very simple example. But I'll always remember that's what showed them like, hey, we can eat these healthy foods too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That modeling is important. But for all the parents out there who are like, come on, I do try to model. Sometimes kids are hardest on their parents than they are on
Oh
other adults.
yes,
So that can happen too. But absolutely having that good model and is so helpful and important.
yeah. Well, this has been just a great conversation, Dr. Bourne. I so appreciate you being with us here today. I think we all learned a lot. I think we all have a lot of like really great content to take back to our homes and our families. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll get those to Dr. Bourne and we'll do some communication back and forth that way. But Dr. Bourne, any other closing comments before we wrap up today?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Such a timely, great topic for all of us to discuss today. So thanks to our audience for taking the time, and hopefully we will see you next month. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everybody.